What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Keegan and Company podcast. This is the very first solo episode that I've ever done. I've been curious about doing a solo episode for a little while now, but it was just something that we haven't really leaned into. But now, 2025, we're looking at expanding. We're looking at giving you guys some really cool, fun things. This was one of the things that definitely stood out. Obviously, we want to give you guys as much content as possible around certain themes. We obviously have guests come on, different athletes, psychologists, people who are, I guess, influential in the sporting space. And I guess the whole goal is to have conversations with them to normalize stigmas around mental health, to have conversations with them of particular things that they might have been struggling with currently or previously, or things that they might potentially be anxious about, but then also providing really good tools, tips, and strategies about how they got out of it. And obviously, these guys are super high performance, so it's a huge learning thing for us. However, selfishly, there are certain key themes and tricks and traits and concepts that I really want to learn. And I think the best way to learn these things is being able to articulate them. So when I have these ideas around certain concepts that I'm learning at university, or books that I'm reading, or studies that I'm trying to analyze, it's like, well, what's the best way to learn? Best way to learn is by actually being able to articulate it and relate it to lived experience and relate it to conversations that we might have already had on the podcast. So a lot of these things that we will be talking about will be around those certain themes. And today is a really, really great example of that is gratitude and gratefulness. And I picked the feeling of gratefulness for a number of reasons. One, because it was super important to my life. And B, I've been reading some content. I've been reading some books around it. That's been really interesting me. So I guess that's probably a big reason why today we're going to be talking about gratitude and gratefulness, and some really great takeaway tools that you guys can actually physically take away that'll help, hopefully. So when I think of gratefulness, like, what is gratefulness? And gratefulness is a feeling of deep appreciation for kindness or benefits received. So think real people, places, experiences, things, and smaller the better, right? So when we talk about gratefulness, or including gratitude into a daily practice or a weekly practice, or when we're overwhelmed, this is a really great way to put us in a better mindset, right? So when something goes wrong in your life, whether that might be someone cuts you off in traffic, or you and your partner might have just had split up, or you might not be training as well as you thought it would be, or you might be overcoming certain battles of injuries, or whatever it is. Like, pick your poison. This tool, the tool of gratitude and gratefulness, is such a great way to flip that switch and almost positively reframe into a really great mindset. And I bring this up because I've done it. This is something that I did when I was playing footy. A really great example of this was when I was playing at the Gold Coast Titans. I was playing at the Brisbane Broncos in my under-20s competition. It's putting a lot of pressure on myself to play in the NRL. So I was in an under-20s competition, which was semi-professional, training full-time, and just really wanted to make my NRL debut. That was the goal. And I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, was overtraining. I was selected in the Australian under-20 side, but just kept getting injured. I had a hamstring tear. Ended up tearing my hamstring about 5 times throughout the course of that year, and I just couldn't stay on the paddock. And obviously, when you're in that mind frame, and for anyone who has been in periods of injury or rehabilitation or training rehab, it's isolating, it's alone. You do feel anxiety around, like, am I going to get back on the field? Is this something that I really want to do? All the negative thoughts come into your brain, right? And so I remember thinking back, if it was an ACL or if it was a shoulder reconstruction, then at least I would know it would be 9 to 12 months recovery, and I could prep for it and I would be okay with it. However, the thing with the hamstring and my mind frame back then was, I firstly tore it, and then I probably rushed it to get back, and then I tore it again. And I realized that rushing it probably isn't the best way to go about it. So what I did was I would work really hard, do all the rehabilitation, take a little bit longer, but then I would tear it again. And then, okay, all right, well, we might have rushed it. Let's do all the right things. Let's go to the AIS. Let's get the best hamstring specialist that we can, that the Bronx knew, and get back on the paddock. I knew the plan. I knew everything that I needed to do. Then I would tear it again. I ended up tearing it about 5 times throughout this season. And I remember being on the phone to my manager and my dad on the 5th time in tears, thinking that I didn't want to play footy anymore. Like, I hadn't made my NRL debut yet. I was still in a semi-professional competition, but that was the goal. That was something that I really wanted to do. So I thought, I'm going to give it away. I was on the phone, Dad, I'm done. He's like, call your manager, Clinton. I remember calling my manager and he's like, mate, you're still so young. Like, you're only 19 years old. He's like, stop putting so much pressure on yourself to play. Anyway, I'll circle back to how gratitude and how gratefulness came into my life. Anyway, I made a mid-season transfer to the Gold Coast Titans. It was my hometown team. I was really excited. They had a really good opportunity to potentially play NRL in that season. And what happened was I sat in a talk with a guy by the name of Hugh van Cuylenburg, the Resilience Project. Some of you might have heard the Resilience Project or read his book, The Resilience Project. If you haven't, one of the resources that I highly recommend. I read his book a number of times now. They also host a podcast called The Imperfects, which is a very similar concept. This is, what Keegan and company drew actually a lot of inspiration from, was The Imperfects. They've been going for a number of years now. But essentially, Hugh went around to schools, sporting clubs, professional sporting clubs, and discussed about this principle called gratitude, gratefulness, as well as mindfulness and empathy. But the thing that stuck out to me was gratitude. And what he did was he tied it into these really great experiences. He discussed how he went over to India and he found all these, he was in this village where these kids had absolutely nothing. They were in this school where there was no windows on doors and everything was built in clay. And then they had to walk a couple miles to get water. It was a third world country. They were really struggling. But the thing that they found out was, the thing that Hugh realized was that all these kids were so happy. And so it was just like, well, how can these kids who, don't even have pens to write in books, they didn't have all these things, yet they were the happiest people that he'd ever seen. And, he ended up staying for a number of weeks, potentially even a month or a couple of months. I can't quite remember. But essentially what he found was that these kids were consistently practicing gratitude without even realizing it. So they would go to the playground and there was this little kid and who had a big effect on Hugh's life. He'd be like, how good is this playground? And the playground was falling apart. Thought like someone was going to get injured on it. But it's like, man, how good is it that we have our own playground? Or it's like, how good is it that we have, I've got a pair of shoes. The shoes were, ripped and torn, but he was so pumped that he had this one pair of shoes. But they would do that constantly. And what he realized was that it was like a trained skill. And so they were constantly, and it was almost just like reinforcing and positively reinforcing these habits. Anyway, he discussed this with us, and his program and his regime is writing 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And this is the first time I'd heard about this. Probably a little bit skeptical, but I had just moved into the Gold Coast Titans. I was really keen to get my hamstrings right. I think I was back probably in a happier spot where I was with guys that I grew up with, guys who I looked up to. I was back surfing. I was back knocking around. It was a really fun environment to be in. But I remember I stuck to it. And the thing is that we are constantly we're negatively inclined more times than not. But we can train our brains. Like we can genuinely retrain our brains to write down, when we do write down 3 things that we're grateful for 21 days, because that's a great way to build habits, is by doing it for 21 days or doing it for an extended period of time. Our brain actually starts to rewire itself and to start actually looking for the positives in things. And that's what happened to me. I was writing these things down of all these things that I'm grateful for, whether it was my friends, whether it was my family, whether it was being able to successfully complete a rehab session, or being able to run at 70%, at 80%, at 90%, to eventually 100%. And it was just an incredible way to actually retrain our mind. And I saw the positive effects. And don't get me wrong, like habits are a tricky thing to build. And that year I went really well. I was writing my 3 things that I was grateful for every day, and I loved it. And the best thing ever, I got to make my NRL debut at the end of the year. And I do put that down to a feeling of gratefulness. Don't get me wrong, there are periods that I come in and out of this, right? I've started to journal now, and that naturally flows into gratitude. But I think a really great start and a really great tool is writing 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And even better, if it includes someone, sharing it with them, because that is such a beautiful thing, and that actually really inspires other people, and it gives other people a really great, I don't know, makes them feel good. It really is awesome. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest pushback is that a lot of people who might say, well, it doesn't fix my problems, and it won't. Like, just to be completely clear, writing 3 things that you're grateful for won't fix your problems, but what it will do is look for things that will bring you happiness, and you'll actually end up seeing the light in things. So while it might not change things, it will give you a different viewpoint, and it might change your perception, which I think is awesome. I think that is super cool, and this is something that I've told so many friends about. If you don't have a journal, journal it. If you don't have, you have your phone, write it in your notes, like put it up on an Instagram story. Like, these are some really, really beautiful things. So prescription, what I need you to do for the next 21 days, if you choose to commit to it, is just write 3 things that you're grateful for. I like the act of actually writing it down, and the smaller the better. It could be something like, oh, I got to have a 20-minute sauna today, which is actually kind of big. It might be, this person smiled and said good morning to me. It might have been like, I've got the ability to be able to buy a coffee for a friend this morning, or a friend bought a coffee for me. Smaller the better. And also new things. Don't get in the trap of writing the exact same thing down every week or every day. Mix it up. Try and really search for close your eyes. It takes 30 seconds. So you can close your eyes and genuinely just sit in it. And Phil Stutz, another resource. Hugh van Cuylenburg, Brazilian Quakers, is awesome. But Lessons for Living by Phil Stutz. He has another book called Tools, which is awesome. You might have heard or seen Phil from the Netflix documentary Stutz, which is on Netflix. He's Jonah Hill's psychologist. Essentially what he does is provide tools that helps people in everyday life to get out of certain situations, whether in a funk or whatever. But he talks about a similar thing called where is it? This is great content for people. The gratitude flow, which is essentially a very similar situation, is that when we're overwhelmed, when we're in feelings of anxiety and negative emotions, and we can't control these things, and we're just constantly looking for the bad in things, which we all go through. Like that happens to all of us. But the feeling of closing your eyes and imagining and feeling every single little thing that we're grateful for. So today I'm grateful. I got to catch up with 2 players who are transitioning or who are in between contracts. I got to make my own cold brew. That is awesome. I'm doing my very first solo episode, which I am a little bit nervous for, and I'm not sure how it will be received, but I know this is the start of something awesome and beautiful. I get to go for a walk later on. I got to go for a ride with one of my best mates this morning, and you just feel, and you can almost feel the energy pushing out of you. And it does sound a little bit woo-woo, but really like concentrate and not just say it and not just think it, but really feel those things. Now saying it out loud does sound a little bit woo-woo, but this stuff I think is really great. And you think about the benefits, like the positive benefits of you being in a positive headspace towards your kids, towards your partner, towards other teammates, and exuding a really great energy. I think that's some of my favorite people. Some of my favorite people in the world do this, because you talk about people. You don't forget what they did, but you forget what they did, but you don't forget how they made you feel. So when you see someone that has that really great energy about them, that's infectious and that's contagious. And I think if you are that person, and if you use this as a way to stay present and think about all the things you're grateful for, I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it probably also stops us from not looking forward in sense of a materialistic way, where it's just like we always want what we can't have, right? It's like the if and then model. Like, if I get this, then I'll be happy. If I get this new contract, then I'll be happy. If I get this new house, then I'll be happy. If I get this new promotion, then I'll be happy. When in reality, we have so many great things around us, and if we look back, we might see how far we've come, and our younger self might be like, I never thought you could have done that, but now you're here and you're doing that now, and it's a beautiful thing. So not getting trapped in that sense of constantly wanting more, which I fall sucker to all the time, and it's something that I am trying to be better at, and that is something, a goal for 2025. While I think ambition and drive and goals is awesome, and it is such an awesome trait to have, it's such an attractive trait to have, I think a better piece would be being able to be present and being able to fill people up with energy. Anyway, that's the first episode. Done. I've just rambled. I don't even know what I said. But essentially, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about different themes and different concepts that I'm learning through university and books, like Stutz' book. And I think this will be a turning point in the podcast. I love having the guests. I don't think we'll ever stop having the guests. If anything, we'll probably ramp the guest episodes up. But I think this is a really cool way to concrete information and give you guys just some takeaway tools. Like, these athletes who are so incredible at what they do, they're giving us amazing tools and amazing tricks and amazing strategies. And I don't want them to get lost in the episode. If anything, that's the stuff that I want to amplify. It's awesome that these guys are so open and vulnerable in their conversations, but I don't want the tools and tips and strategies to get lost, because that's the most valuable information that we have, and that's kind of the whole reason why we do this. So picking apart that stuff, amplifying it, and then being able to take it away and take it into your day, into your everyday life. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feedback. If you think this was just shit, and to be honest, it probably will be, because it's the first time we're doing this. Listen back to a couple of the first episodes that we did of Keegan Company. They sucked. Actually, no, they didn't suck, because the guests were awesome, but my interviewing skills definitely needed some work. But that's where we're at. And it's a learning piece, and we are learning. So stay with us, bear with us. If you do have any feedback, you can drop it in the comments, or you can just hit me up on social media. It's Keegan and Company Pod or Keegan Hipgrave, and we'll go from there. See you next week, and tune into the podcast. And if you haven't already, if you're listening to this deep into this episode, give us a little subscribe on YouTube or your audio channel. So Spotify and Apple. That's my last plug. That's all I've got for you guys. Have the best day, and actually, even shoot me a message on what you're grateful for. That would be sick. Cheers, crew.